Welcome to Forensic Science Sunday, where I tell you one true crime case that was solved using forensic science, all while doing, that's right, my makeup. Today's video will be featuring the Drop Dead Gorgeous A Little Bit Psycho palette from BH Cosmetics. All the other items I'm using in this video will be linked in the description below. Please read the disclaimer. I am not a professional forensic pathologist, nor am I a professional makeup artist. I am just the average girl at home like you, planning my makeup. Sometimes I do my nails while I talk about a true crime case. So if that's something you're into, then you are more than welcome to stick around and hit the subscribe button. Also, quick reminder, the comment section is a privilege. Don't fuck it up. Now let's get into today's case. Now I try to wear black in these videos because it just goes better with makeup. Like I can do any makeup look as long as I'm wearing black, but I'm running out of black tops, okay? So your girl needs to buy more black tops. Anyway, nobody cares, nobody cares, nobody cares. So this all takes place in the summer of 1992 in Bridgeton, Maine, where single mother Crystal Perry lived with her 12-year-old daughter, Sarah. Now, Crystal, she was a dedicated mom who would do anything for her daughter. She worked very hard to provide the best life she could for her daughter. Now, Crystal, she worked at a shoe factory. Everyone that spoke about Crystal said the same thing, that she was an amazing mom and that she worked very, very hard to support her and Sarah's lifestyle, which I mean wasn't that lavish, and she would even pick up extra shifts, whatever she could do as a single parent, which I absolutely commend. I don't know how single parents do it. I really don't. Like when I think about it, I'm just like, how? Like I don't even know how parents do it as a team. So I can't even imagine single parents doing that. It's just like, what? So I definitely commend her for that. But I guess, you know, when you don't have a choice, you gotta do shit. So and her and Sarah had a really special relationship. I wouldn't say they were more like friends. Obviously there was a mother-daughter relationship, but it was a very close relationship. They did a lot of things together. They were always together. They would be in the same house. They would always have talks and stuff. Like late one summer night after Sarah had gone to bed, she woke up to the sound of her mother screaming. And then she heard her mother screaming from the kitchen, no, like really loud. And she says that she remembered this because it was so loud. She describes it as the loudest, most terrifying no she's ever heard in her entire life. It was pretty traumatizing to her. Instantly, she knew that something was wrong and her mother was in trouble. After she heard her mother scream no, she didn't know what to do. She knew something was wrong. She heard struggling, but she was kind of frozen, you know. She was a kid. Terrified, she goes over to her door and she opens the door, but it's completely dark out and she can't see. She hears someone in the kitchen moving around. She hears clanking, and then she hears one of the drawers in the kitchen open, and she hears like silverware and utensils clanking. And then shortly after that, she begins to hear a loud pounding, as though someone's like pounding into something. All she could think was at that time was that someone was most likely killing someone else. Can you imagine at 12 years old this happening and you just being stuck in your bedroom in the dark, like, what the F do I do? Do I go out there and save my mother? Although that could be my mother, or it could be the bad guy, like not knowing what to do, like just frozen in your bedroom, peeking out of the door. She says that the pounding was so loud and it was like multiple pounding sounds. I mean, that's crazy. I don't know why, but when I was younger, in one of the houses we used to live in, I used to be terrified to go into the kitchen at night as well. It almost felt like there was like something in the kitchen, but I didn't know what. Even like just to pass the kitchen on my way to the bathroom, I was terrified. I didn't even want to look in the kitchen. You know, I don't know why. It was the weirdest thing. Nothing ever happened in the kitchen. It was just like this feeling that I would get, and I would just run straight to the bathroom, like, don't look, don't look, don't look. And sometimes I wouldn't even go to the bathroom. I would just like hold my pee because I didn't want to look into the kitchen. A couple of moments later, after she heard this loud pounding noise, everything got quiet. And she didn't know what to do. She wasn't sure if the attacker who had entered their home was still in the house or if they had left. But at some point, Sarah realized that she had to call 911. She had to go outside of her bedroom and see what was going on. She describes leaving her room to go check on her mother, and as she goes into the kitchen, she sees a body laying on the floor that has been stabbed. She's pretty sure it's her mom, but she's hoping that, you know, it's not, that it's the attacker. And as she gets closer to the body, she realizes that it is her mother, and there's blood everywhere. I'm sorry guys, I have to mix this foundation because it's not my shade. So if I'm looking down for a while, like, that's why. I know some people say that I don't make enough eye contact, but honestly, like, I'm doing shit, y'all. I have to mix this, that's why. In a state of panic, Sarah is trying to wake her mom up. Like, she's shaking her mom, and her mom's not moving. You guys, her mom is gone. Crystal is completely unresponsive, so Sarah runs to the phone to dial 911. Now, this was 1992, so again, no cell phones. There might have been cell phones, but they didn't have cell phones, so they only had a landline. From the landline, she tries to call, but as soon as she picks up the phone, there's no dial tone, which meant that the phone line was most likely cut, and, you know, there was no service coming through. So Sarah, she couldn't get a dial tone. So she bolts out of the house and she runs to her neighbors. She actually runs about half a mile. And for a 12-year-old, that's a lot. In the middle of the night, like, that's a lot. She runs a half a mile to her neighbor's house, but no one answers the door when she's knocking. And I guess they just couldn't hear her. They were sleeping, you know, whatever. Sometimes people sleep with earplugs. When they didn't answer, Sarah kept running. She ran to a nearby restaurant where she told them that her mother had been stabbed and was bleeding and on their kitchen floor, and that she was pretty sure that her mother was dead and that she needed to call the cops. Of course, they let her use the phone to call the police. She tells the operator that there was someone in the house. She didn't see who it was because she was asleep when they came, and that her mother had been stabbed and that she was bleeding all over the place, and that she was in their kitchen laying on the floor, and that they may be still in the home, and that she believed that this person was after her now. This poor baby, she was so frightened. She thought that the person was also after her, like chasing her. That's probably how she ran that far. So when police arrived on the scene, they find Crystal laying on the kitchen floor, and they say that it was a horrific scene. They said that there was blood everywhere. Crystal had been stabbed over 50 times. Again, I just don't know how, like, people can, like, stab that many times. You would think that somebody's arm would, or their wrist or something, would get tired after, like, I don't know, 8 to 10 times, but that's a lot of freaking times. Like, you know that this is someone who really didn't like her to be stabbing her for that amount of times. There was a pool of blood around Crystal's body. There were swipes in blood swipes all over the floor, blood droplets. There were footprints in blood. A very gruesome crime scene, to say the least. According to investigators, there was a huge blood trail that started in the living room and led back into the kitchen to where her body was found. Investigators classified her killing as a crime of passion. They say because of the overkill, and they believe that it had to be someone that knew Crystal who would do this to her. They found no signs of forced entry, and there was nothing taken from the home that would make them think it was a robbery or anything like that. And Crystal was also found in her bathrobe which led them to believe that she probably was either in bed sleeping already or getting ready to go to bed, or maybe she got out of the bed for whatever reason. But definitely she wasn't expecting company, because why would she be in her robe if she's expecting company, unless she's expecting a certain type of company? I mean, and they felt like because there was no sign of forced entry and she was in her robe, that she most likely knew who the assailant was, and she opened the door to them and let them in, because it was really late at night and someone's not going to open the door for a stranger that late at night in their bathrobe, you know. So they did feel like at this point that it had to be somebody that she knew, somebody close to the victim. It appeared that the assailant had tried to clean up after himself, like he tried to wipe up the blood. Forensic scientists found multiple footprints of different clarity, meaning they were some that were super clear impressions and then some that were maybe partial impressions. And I mean, without all of that blood, fool, you tried to clean it up, you should have known. Clearly it wasn't planned, because if you thought you were going to stab somebody 50 times and then be able to clean that mess up by yourself in that amount of time, no way. Because Crystal was barefoot, it was very easy for them to tell Crystal's footprints apart from the assailants, who had been wearing shoes or boots at that time. Briston was a very small town, so news got around really quick about Crystal's murder. The people in the town were really freaking out because there was an attacker amongst them and they didn't know who it was. Like I said, it's a really small town, so most people knew each other, and they just couldn't believe that someone amongst them in their community could commit such a horrendous crime like this. They were unsettled, and I would be too. Hello. There was also fingerprints found at the crime scene, but it was too soaked in blood for forensic scientists to get any positive ID from them, so they were completely unusable. So investigators brought in a blood splatter analyst, and this blood splatter analyst found a very distinctive blood splatter on Crystal's body that they thought would be definitive enough to tell what had actually happened to her that night, and possibly they would be able to identify her killer. They found what they would call passive blood droplets on one of her legs. Lucy, turn that off. That was Lucy's cricket toy. Shit. Shut up. Think I did the camera, you look creeped. Hey. Forensic scientists found what they called passive blood droplets, and these were little droplets of blood that they found on Crystal's leg. According to blood splatter experts, passive blood drops are almost always circular at the point of impact, and they come from blood dripping down from something that is a stationary source, is how they described it. So something that's still, that's not moving. They're dropping straight down, and that is the reason why they are perfectly circular on impact. Their findings was that this had happened after Crystal had already been dead or down. Maybe she was unconscious or motionless. She definitely was not moving at the time that these droplets hit her leg. They came to the conclusion that this most likely was not Crystal's blood, but it was her attacker's blood, and that led them to do another test. They were thinking that probably during the struggle that the assailant accidentally cut himself, or somehow he got cut. And they also found blood droplets in the kitchen. They said that there was droplets on the countertops, there was droplets in the sink, there was droplets by the paper towel holder. It appeared as though he had gone to the kitchen sink to maybe rinse his hand off and to get paper towels to probably, I don't know, cover his wound or something. Now, they found these little blood droplets, this particular pattern, leading from the body to the kitchen sink, but they didn't have any of those patterns, those droplets, going back to the body or out of the door. So the next thing that investigators did was they took the shoe print that they found at the crime scene, and they went to a local shoe shop and they wanted to see if they could find a shoe that matched that footprint. And they did. They found a shoe in a local shoe shop that matched the bloody footprint that they found at the crime scene. So the shoe was an Oak Harbor Danny style shoe. Police now had an idea of what the suspect could possibly be wearing. That way, while they were interviewing potential suspects, they could look at their shoes and be like, is he wearing a pair of Oak Harbor? Because, bro, we need to get the cuffs. We need to take them down to the joint. Okay. An autopsy was performed on Crystal, and they did find that Crystal had been sexually assaulted, and so they were able to collect some DNA from Crystal's body, some biological DNA that would help them identify the killer. Of course, investigators want to rule out the people that are closest to her. The first potential suspect they look into is Crystal's ex-husband, because he only lived about 6 miles away from Crystal. According to Crystal's daughter, Sarah, she really didn't know her father very well. She said that she knew of him, like he lived in town with them, but she wasn't that close with him. They rarely really visited each other or had a real relationship. With further investigation, police found out that Crystal and her ex-husband at that time wasn't really getting along. They were having issues. They weren't sure why. Some speculate that it was over child support. Who knows? You know, sometimes you just don't get along with your ex. Police weren't really sure what the reason was for them not getting along and not co-parenting very well together. It appeared as though Crystal was just took over the whole entire parenting thing, and she was just doing it by herself. Investigators were looking for the motive and opportunity he would have had to commit the crime. The fact that he didn't like her and that they were having issues already and that he lived only a few miles away, that would be motive and opportunity covered. I mean, but really, is it a motive to actually kill somebody, your ex, just because you don't like them? I mean, don't answer that question. Don't answer that. I didn't tell you guys Crystal's ex-husband's name. Crystal's ex-husband's name was Thomas, and Thomas told police that he was at home at the time of Crystal's death, and he had an alibi, which was his live-in girlfriend at the time, and her name was Joanne. Now, Joanne, according to investigators, was very, very problematic. She was always causing trouble and conflict between, you know, her and Crystal. And actually, a couple of weeks before Crystal's death, Joanne and Crystal got into some sort of conflict or altercation. She started something with Crystal, okay, because she didn't like Crystal. Sometimes you don't like your partner's exes, I guess, and you kind of just like, I don't know though, because I'm just like, I really don't care about my partner's exes unless they try to involve themselves into something. And usually if I care, it's because my partner actually cares and my partner is in contact with them, but it really has nothing to do with that person itself. My problem would be more or less with my partner. They have a relationship, they have a child together. It's really none of my business. So if I have an issue, I don't know, like, maybe I would if the person did something to me, but I just find, like, in most circumstances and situations, like, why have an issue with your partner's ex when it has nothing to do with you, you know, unless it has something to do with you. Like, as far as I'm concerned, keep the drama to yourself. That's between y'all two. And I never try to get involved in any of the drama. So police keep digging on Joanne because they're like, hey, maybe Joanne had a possible motive here and maybe she did it. So they discover that Joanne has been jealous of Crystal for a long time. At some point, the two of them got into a really bad altercation in a local bar, and Joanne punched Crystal in the face, and Crystal had a huge black eye, and the bar owners actually had to pull the two of them apart. So, girl, why you out here fighting people's exes? If you feel that way about your person, the person you're dating's ex, then something ain't right between you and your person, because you shouldn't feel like that. They shouldn't make you feel like that, or you just fucking crazy, and you know that's possible too. But girl, check yourself, because I have to say, you know, maybe check your relationship with your person. Now, Joanne, she ends up getting charged with assault from that bar altercation. So you know, she was pretty pissed at Crystal, and she really didn't like her. She was that jealous of Crystal. Ultimately, the charges against Joanne was dropped, but investigators still felt like Joanne was a possible suspect, and the fact that Joanne and Thomas's alibis were each other and they both didn't like Crystal really made the police feel uneasy about them and their alibis. Their alibis just wasn't as strong because of this, and police really did think that Joanne may have been, quite possibly could have been, the murderer. Police was not the only one that suspected Joanne to be the killer. Other people in town thought Joanne also quite possibly could be the killer. People would call the police station and say that they thought that Joanne had something to do with Crystal's murder. They would tell police that Joanne was a pretty tough woman and could definitely like do something very harmful to Crystal. However, Crystal's daughter Sarah had another suspect in mind. She told police that she heard the killer arguing with her mother that night, and he sounded a lot like Crystal's boyfriend, who was 19. Crystal, girl, what are you doing? I mean, I know he's legal, he's of age, but like, why? I do believe Crystal was in her 30s at this time, and I question what her and a 19-year-old really had in common to begin with. But I mean, it's none of my business. He is legal, so I can't really say anything. It's none of my business. It's not my taste, you know. Apparently, Crystal was having this affair with a 19-year-old. I would call it a boy, but you know, he was of age, so I guess he was a man. But I just can't think of him of that way. Okay. Anyway, she was having an affair with this 19-year-old. Her daughter said that the voice she overheard arguing with her mother that night sounded a lot like the boyfriend. So police began to look into Crystal's boyfriend. His name was Dennis Butler. According to Sarah, she had seen Dennis get upset quite a few times with her mother. She said that she would see Dennis go from being just irritated to out of control angry, like raging anger. So she thought that he could quite possibly have done something to her mother. Maybe he got angry and he just snapped. Investigators found out that Dennis and Crystal's relationship was very volatile. Obviously, they felt like a lot of it had to do with their age. The fact that Dennis was only 19 and Crystal was 30. They weren't on the same level of maturity, obviously, so they would get into these really, really volatile situations where they would get really angry with each other, and they were having a lot of problems. Now it's time to go into the palette. But anyway, back to the story. Police talked to some of Crystal's co-workers, and one of Crystal's co-workers came forward and said that Crystal confided in them. She told them that one time she had gotten into an argument with Dennis, and Dennis got so angry that the argument escalated from just, you know, a verbal argument to him pulling out a knife and saying that he was going to kill her. Guys, come on. And as you guys know, that is exactly how Crystal died. Police are looking like, this is our guy. They're pretty sure that Dennis is the culprit. So they bring Dennis in for questioning, and Dennis tells police that he had nothing to do with Crystal's murder, and that in fact he was at home with his parents. He's 19, so he's living with his parents. So basically, Dennis's alibi was his parents, who ultimately could not confirm with police whether or not Dennis, their son, was home that night or not, because they just didn't know. They were not sure. But Dennis was adamant that he was home that night, and he even offered to take a polygraph test. Police did issue a polygraph test on Dennis. He did not pass the first test, so police gave him a second test, and he did not pass the second test either. Like, obviously it's not looking too good for Dennis. Everything at this point is pointing towards Dennis being the murderer. Sarah ultimately had to move into one of her relatives' homes, and she really did have a difficult time after her mother's death. She was completely traumatized, as you can imagine, for good reason. She had a really hard time being alone by herself. She was really crying a lot. It was a really tough time for her. Now, just because he did not pass the polygraph test does not mean he was the one to have actually killed Crystal. It just meant that he was being deceptive. Back then, polygraph test was a new thing, and a lot of police departments really depended on it. As technology has advanced today, we know that polygraph tests aren't even really that accurate. He could have possibly knew the killer or knew what happened that night and just wasn't saying it. He wasn't coming forth or being forthright about it, and maybe that's why the test came back as deceptive and he failed. They didn't know, or he could have done it. Who knew? They were not sure. Another thing that was really suspicious that pointed to Dennis being the killer was that his shoe size matched the print size found at the crime scene. However, when police went to search his home, they did not find any Oak brand shoes that he owned. This was a little bit of a setback. So at this point, police did not have enough solid evidence to get any sort of warrant to collect Dennis's DNA, so they actually relied on Dennis just volunteering to give it to them and help them out. And they asked Dennis for his DNA sample. So he agreed to give them his sample, but he told them only on one condition. He said that he knew that all the evidence would probably point back to him, and that if they would just do him the courtesy of when they came to arrest him at work, if they would do it and take him out of the back door, because he did not want to embarrass the business that he worked for, because they had been so kind to him and helped him out and gave him this position. So, I mean, that's odd. You know, you over here killing people, but you don't want to embarrass your boss. So police thought that that was very strange, also very telling of the type of person that, you know, Dennis was. So investigators compared Dennis Butler's DNA to the DNA found at the crime scene. Shockingly, it was not a match. As you can imagine, police are thinking, what the actual F? Because it really looked like it was this guy, and they really thought that they had their guy. Everything, I mean everything, circumstantial evidence, witness statements, everything pointed to it being Dennis, but it just wasn't him, and they didn't know what to do at this point. Investigators were shocked. They really could not believe that it wasn't Dennis. Like, they were in such disbelief that they asked the forensic scientists to test the DNA again, because they were just like, you guys must have made a mistake. I don't know what you were doing in the lab, but you got to test that again, because this is definitely our guy. The forensic scientists, they test the DNA again, and it came back the same as before. It was not Dennis's DNA. I think they were just so sold on it being Dennis that they couldn't really look anywhere else. I'm shocked. I can't believe that it wasn't him. So if the DNA was not Dennis, then whose DNA was it? So investigators go back and they run tests on Crystal's ex-husband, Thomas. They also run tests on his girlfriend, Joanne, and several other suspects or potential suspects that they were looking at. The results came back and there was no match. It's getting intense now, you guys, getting intense. All those people and still no match. I can't even imagine. If I was the lead investigator, I'd be tripping. Like, what do you mean there's no match? As you can imagine, this was pretty frustrating for investigators. I mean, they had done all these tests on all of the different suspects, potential suspects, anyone who could have possibly committed this crime, and nothing was coming back. They're back at square one. They have to look at everyone again, because it's none of the suspects that they thought. They have no idea now who it could have possibly be. Now, because it's such a broad spectrum of who this could have been, they now start to look at suspects that are outside of Crystal's circle. And they take the DNA sample and that they found at the crime scene, and they compare it to profiles in the database of known criminal offenders. But you guys, the results come back, and again, there's no match. Can you believe it? There's no match. After that, the case went cold, and the town was really upset because there was a killer amongst them, and they didn't know who it was, and they were not about to find out anytime soon. As time passed and they still hadn't found Crystal's killer, the townspeople were getting more and more upset. It would take 12 years before investigators would get any new leads in the case, and they did have 2 new potential suspects. One was a serial killer, and the other one was a handyman who had made advances towards Crystal, and she turned him down, and he was pretty upset about that. I mean, what is going on with these handymans? Didn't I just do a case about a handyman? Ooh, I like this look. Just the color scheme. Ugh. Ooh, child. This is all up in and down my street and road, girl. I'm gonna go in and wet the brush for that one, honey, because the brush deserves to be wet for this. Yes, it does. Oh my God. I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with this look. Oh my gosh. It's so pretty. Okay, stop. Police did do DNA test on the new potential suspects, but once again, they had no match. I mean, I'm starting to think, what the F is going on here? Because is it like a freaking ghost? Do we need to hire Ghostbusters or something? Because I mean, this is getting ridiculous. At this point, Crystal's daughter, Sarah, she had kind of given up on them ever solving her mother's case and figuring out who did this, and she was just, you know, trying to come to terms with everything that had happened. It was beginning to look like Crystal's case would never be solved until the statewide DNA database reported a hit. It was on a man named Michael Hutchinson, who had served 6 months in prison for a weapons offense. Now, because he had that offense, he was required by law to submit a DNA sample, and that's how his DNA got into the database, and they eventually matched it to the DNA found at the crime scene. Oh my God, this was like a long one, you guys. Like, wow. Finally, they had a match, and they didn't have to call the Ghostbusters. At the time of Crystal Perry's death, Michael Hutchinson was only 19 years old, and he lived about a mile away from Crystal. His name never popped up on police's radar because Crystal and him had no relations, like they didn't know each other. They never suspected him. They didn't even know he existed because he didn't know Crystal. He had nothing to do with Crystal. No one would suspect him. So police brought Michael into the station for questioning, and he actually told police, where he admitted to police, that he was in fact there the night that Crystal was murdered. He alleged that he and Crystal was having a romantic relationship and that he had come over to have sex with her. We're all adults here. He came over to bang her, to do you know what. And while he was in bed with her, an intruder broke in. Yeah. Who's gonna believe that? First of all, isn't it just a little bit weird and ironic that she was dating a 19-year-old and she ends up getting murdered by this random 19-year-old? Like, too many 19-year-olds. I mean, I'm not victim blaming, so don't come at me with that shit, but honestly, people, really, these stories are for us to learn lessons. I know there's gonna be some people in the comments coming for me like, hey, you victim blaming, you victim shaming. Shut up. Shut up, guys. With all the love in my heart for you, shut up. Did she deserve to be murdered for it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But these stories are lessons for us to learn from so we don't repeat the same mistakes. So Michael, he tells police that he was in the bed doing a do with Crystal when an intruder broke into the home. He claims that he went out to the kitchen to see what's going on, and he saw the guy in the kitchen, and he and the guy got into like a confrontation, and they started to struggle with each other, and he ended up being knocked out unconscious. And when he awoke, he saw the man standing over Crystal, stabbing her multiple times. In fear, he bolted out of the house and down the street. However, he never, for whatever reason, thought to go to the police station and report the incident that had just occurred. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So police don't know what to think at this point, because this case, as you can see, has been a surprise from the beginning to the end. Investigators weren't sure if they were talking with someone who had witnessed this horrific murder, or if they actually had the killer in custody. When police asked Michael why he did not obviously call 911, why he did not report what happened that night, he told police it was because he was embarrassed. He was embarrassed because he was not able to protect Crystal and her daughter, and he ran. So that's the reason why he didn't want to come forward. And really that makes no effing sense. But during the investigation, police also spoke with an ex-girlfriend of Michael's, and she said that although she had an abusive relationship with Michael and she had multiple protection orders against him because he was abusive to her during their relationship, she still told police that she did not believe Michael was a killer. She stood by Michael, and she was very adamant that Michael was no killer, just an abuser, not a killer. With further investigation, police discovered that all of the acquaintances of Michael, everyone that police questioned that knew Michael, all of his ex-girlfriends, all said that he was a little bit, they used the word nuts. They said that he would have these explosive fits of rage and anger, and he would be very, very nasty and abusive towards them. Another thing that police thought was suspicious and made Michael look bad, or made his story appear untrue, was the fact that if Michael and Crystal were together in the way that he said that they were together, if they were having this affair, then how come Crystal's daughter never met him? Like, why didn't she see him? Like, part of me is like, okay, maybe she didn't meet him because, Crystal did not want her to meet him, but it's like she would have seen him. According to Crystal's daughter, Sarah, she said her and her mom had a really close relationship, like I told you guys earlier, and that she would have known if her mom had a boyfriend or something like that, or if there was another guy in her life, because her and her mom lived in the same house. She said they were practically attached at the hip. They did everything as a pair. So there was no way that Crystal would have had this relationship going on without Sarah's knowledge. She was there with Sarah all the time. So this just didn't really make sense. And, Sarah told police, no, I never met him. I don't know him. And the other thing that police found really suspicious was the fact that Michael's story did not match the crime scene. He claimed he was in bed with Crystal that night, but the crime scene showed that there was only one person in the bed. Well, at least it appeared like there was only one person that had been in the bed, because there was only one side of the bed that was unmade, that was messed up. So, I mean, if two people are in the bed and they doing a do, I don't know about you, okay? But if I was doing a do, all of the bed gonna be messed up, okay? Not just one little side of the bed, as though one person had got out of their covers, and you know, what the hell was y'all really doing in there? Y'all wasn't really doing nothing. Obviously, he was lying and he was absolutely busted. Also, the shoe impressions that they found at the crime scene showed that there was only one other person there outside of Crystal that night. Only one shoe impression, and the other impression that they found was a barefoot impression, which was Crystal's impression. So that showed that there was no one else at the crime scene as he had suggested, because if he was there and Crystal was there and this random intruder was there, then you would have had the boot print, Crystal's bare footprint, and probably his bare footprint. I'm assuming he takes off his shoes during sex. I don't know, maybe leaves them on, who knows, this guy. The last thing that forensic investigators did was to compare the blood droplets found on Crystal's body to Michael's DNA, and of course, they matched. Proof that Michael Hutchinson was in fact the killer. Michael was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Also, I forgot to mention this earlier, but Michael's friends and his co-workers and everyone that knew him also said that Michael had a drug problem, that he would oftentimes take different substances, that he was abusing substances during that time, and this would also make him act really erratic. And police suspected that Michael may have been on drugs during that night. When police arrested Michael, they searched him and they noticed that Michael had a very large cut on the palm of his hand. This would be consistent with their findings of his blood droplets on Crystal's body. Now, during the trial, Michael decided to testify in his own defense. I don't know, girl. I don't know why he did that, but he decided. I guess he thought that he was smarter, or that he could say something that would save him. Who knows? He said that he had nothing to do with Crystal Perry's death. However, the forensic evidence proved differently, and the jury didn't buy it. Thanks to forensic science and some good police work, Michael Hutchinson was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. What did you guys think about this case? I know it was a crazy one. And my makeup look, please let me know in the comments down below. If you like videos like these, you can check out my last episode or my other videos. I'll leave them linked on the screen right here or right here. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. Please share because it really helps me out. And I'll see you guys next week with another Forensic Friday, Saturday, or Sunday episode. Bye.